Hey there, welcome back to another video. My name's Bruce and today I'm going to show you how I made this modern looking TV console with a lift. So a lot of our furniture in our house has been kind of more toward the traditional side. We are gradually replacing that with more modern looking stuff. It's got some modern touches with the way the angles are cut and then the spindly legs that I turned. The TV comes up out of the back section here, but let me show you how I made it. I was sent this TV lift by the folks over at tvliftcabinet.com. I'll have links below to the lift like the one I'm using here, so big thanks to them for sending this over and inspiring this project to happen. I started out this project with a ton of breaking down materials and just milling up things. I started out using my circular saw on a straight edge. I was getting okay results with this. I had made a door board previously, so I would use it on the really long pieces, but anytime you're cutting full sheets of plywood and need really tight accuracy, this may not be the best way. There were a few pieces that I decided to put together and use a flush trim bit to make sure they were exactly the same so that each side of the cabinet would be the same. Up until this point, I had been ripping down a bunch of maple plywood that I got from a local hardwood dealer, and that is going to make up the cabinet of this TV console. Next, I'm moving on to making the top. I grabbed some maple and began to rip out the pieces that I needed from some rough stock. My table saw is a little underpowered, so I have to often raise the blade halfway to rip when it's cutting a thick hardwood. Then I raise it all the way and finish the cut. This keeps the piece from binding and I end up with a better cut overall. After I get all of the pieces for the top cut and lay them out in the orientation that I think would look best, I begin to dimension them down to final thickness. After squaring up one of the edges at the joiner, I took them back over to the table saw and got the other edge to be parallel with that edge. Next, I grab my Domino mortiser and just go to town on this top. I'm using this tool to help me align the top pieces, and it did a really great job for that. It plunges a mortise in both pieces that you need, and then you use a loose tenon in those mortises. Then it was time to glue the pieces together. Since I used the Domino, everything went together really smoothly. Next, I turned my attention to the lathe. I'm not going to show the full details of how I made these taper legs for this piece of furniture in this video. I am going to have a future video coming out that tells in more detail how I created them and made them all equal, so be sure to watch for that. After I got the shape I wanted, I drilled out the ends of the legs and glued in some threaded rod with some epoxy. It's important to try to drill these holes as vertical as possible so you don't have any issues when you try to screw these onto the piece of furniture. Moving on, it was time to add some dominoes in the main cabinet. I did this and then started a dry assembly of it. With so many loose tenons and large cabinet pieces, this can be a little tricky. Just be patient and tap everything together. Then my track saw arrived. Things started to get a little more accurate at this point. You can definitely get by with doing this project with just a circular saw and a straight edge, but having a track saw really helped. I like to use rigid insulation under my material when I'm cutting. That way, I'm just cutting into it and not anything else. It also keeps everything supported during the cut. I added a few more dominoes for the side pieces that would end up holding the shelves as well as the vertical partitions. I wanted to spice up the shelves a bit with some contrast, so I grabbed a piece of walnut, ripped down some strips, and then glued on this homemade edge banding onto the shelves. Blue tape works just fine as a clamp for this type of thing. Each of my sides ended up being just a little too long for the back piece that I had, so while the glue was drying on the shelves, I grabbed the sides of the cabinet and ran a rabbet on the back side of each. Once the glue was dry on the shelves, I was able to turn my attention back to them. I used a flush trim saw to make the previously too long sides perfectly flush, and a flush trim bit in my router to make sure the walnut was the same thickness as my shelf material. Then I just finished it off with a hand plane. I am ready to do this glue up. I've got my wife Rebecca here, and I'm pretty nervous about it. This is a big cabinet. I've been working on it, seems like forever, and this glue up has potential to be a nightmare, but we're about to tackle it.
Yeah, we got this.
Let's do it. Just like it is with most projects, the order of operations is one of the toughest parts. Just keep going, adding pieces as you go, and you'll be fine. I put some large clamps on the entire piece, checked some of the shelf sections to see if they were square, and left it for the night. Time to make a face frame for this TV console. I wanted to make it out of solid maple, so I milled up some more maple stock I had. I stuck with the domino theme and used only dominoes and glue to assemble the face frame. I know I'm using the domino a lot in this video, but I was trying to get to know it better. Before this point, I had really only used it to glue up some panels, like in my walnut sliding barn door video and in my workbench video. This was a challenge I wanted to tackle and get to know this tool better. I hope the time invested in it on this project pays off by being able to better use it in future builds. After the glue was dry on the face frame, I attached it to the cabinet with more glue and dominoes. I wanted to take a moment and explain why it's so important for your layout to be very precise when using a domino. Really any joinery, but a domino also. A lot of people think it's just like a point and shoot, just start plunging holes and it'll be fine. I found out the hard way that's not the case. Obviously when you're just jointing two edges like this, you can just strike a line on the top, you know, plunge in, and they go together perfectly. But when you've got something like this that is a 90-degree angle, they're a little bit different. There are two basic fences that you can use to reference on the, I guess really three, but a lot of plunge cuts, if you're in the middle of a piece, are going to be stood up like this and plunged down. Don't worry, I've got it unplugged. Plunge this down into the material. And at that point, you're probably referencing the bottom face. You just have to make sure that with everything you're referencing off of that same face, because you can also flip this down and reference off of the top like this and plunge in. And if you did that in this scenario, they wouldn't line up unless for whatever reason, from each direction, your plunge would be right in the center of that piece. And it's highly unlikely that that happens. So for this one, I'm just trying to walk through a bunch of scenarios to make sure I'm on the right spot. When I had this clamped, I marked a line here on the back, and then I leaned this down, and I used a scrap like this to clamp here, so that mimics that same face. So then I can take this, use the bottom plate, and plunge it right here at the line I drew, and it's going to be accurate. Then for this one, I keep it in this same plane, referencing off the bottom plate. I can basically lay this down flat, line it up, and then plunge like this, referencing off of that same base plate. I tapped it into place and then moved on to some more trim details. I ended up needing a little more height for the inside of the cabinet, so I decided to add a piece of walnut to the top of the cabinet to match the edge banding on the shelves. This won't be seen much, but as you'll see at the end of the video, it turned out to be a nice detail. I'm glad I did it. To speed this along a little more, I used glue and brad nails to secure the walnut pieces. I pre-drilled and added screws to the back panel while I had it up on my assembly table. This was a really heavy piece, and there were quite a few times I had to get my wife or even a neighbor to help me lift it onto or off of the assembly table to move on to the next step. I didn't glue on the back panel. I want to be able to access the lift in the future, so I only used screws. Turning my attention to the top, I broke out the card scraper to take care of a little bit of glue squeeze out. This tool does a great job for leveling out some small discrepancies in the top. Using my track saw, I squared off the top to be the overall size I needed. I had left it a little oversized, and I'm glad I did. This made for a really clean looking top. Then I turned my track saw to 45 degrees and cut a large bevel in the edge of the top on 3 sides. I used a combination square to have the cutting edge of my track a little off of the edge of the workpiece. What that did was allow me to cut a really heavy chamfer on the underside, but with my track saw rather than a router. It worked like a charm. I actually learned this trick recently from Cam over at BLACKTAIL Studio. I'll leave a link to his channel below. The only thing left to do was to separate the top into 2 pieces. One will be hinged for the lift and one will be fixed. More about that later. I drilled some holes in the cabinet for power cords to pass through. Then I cut a piece of piano hinge down to the size I needed and secured it to the back of the cabinet. At this point, I started the arduous task of final sanding, starting with the random orbit sander and finishing by hand. It was finally time to add some finish and see how beautiful this wood was going to look. I always love the transformation of wood when you apply that first coat of finish. I'm using Armor Seal and satin on this piece, and I'm just applying it with a cotton cloth. It's quite an easy finish to apply by just wiping it on, making sure there are no streaks or runs, and then moving on. I wanted to give you a quick tip. So I've put the first coat of Armor Seal on this thing, I've wiped it on, and every time you apply finish, it always leaves kind of a rough feel. A lot of people will sand that with some 320 grit or something really high like that. Another hint I got years ago was use a brown paper sack. So this is just like a lunch sack, craft paper. You just take this and run it across all of your pieces, and it knocks down those nibs and really smooths it out. It's much less dust than actually using sandpaper, and you can get back to applying another coat of finish. I ended up doing a total of 3 coats, sanding in between. Time for some finishing touches. We always add felt feet to all of our furniture. It really saves the floors. I attached the top using some Z-clips, drilled out and added some threaded inserts to accept the legs I turned on the lathe, and threaded on the legs. Adding the lift mechanism was easy. I measured the center of the back piece and added the included metal cleat at the bottom. This is what the lift slots into at the bottom and then gets secured at the top with just a few screws. I used a large square to make sure everything was straight. I secure the control box with some screws and then found some cable clips to tidy up the cords a bit. This next part is not part of the installation instructions, but I just wanted to show you what I came up with. When the lift is all the way in the up position, the hinged piece of the top is still sitting enough forward that it will not flip backwards. Gravity holds it. However, I didn't want to stop there. I have 3 kids and I didn't want to get any pinched fingers if they decided to pull backwards on that panel. I cut 2 thin strips of a thick tooling leather and attached them between the hinged panel and the inside of the back panel with screws. This provided just enough elasticity that the hinged panel would kind of snap back toward the lift, ensuring it would not fall backwards. Securing the TV ended up being pretty simple. There are just 2 machine bolts that screw into the back of your TV and secure to the TV mounting bracket on the lift. The bottom of the TV actually rests on an L bracket on the bottom side of the lift. At this point, all that was left to do was to move it into place, grab the remote, and enjoy the magic. I really like the way this thing turned out. I've spent a lot of time on this and designed it around the lift that was sent to me by the folks at tvliftcabinet.com. That is kind of what drove some of the design. The shelves ended up looking really good. I like that I used the walnut edge banding, and then I ended up needing to raise the whole thing a little bit, and I decided to put a piece of walnut here also as an accent. It hinges up from the back very easily. I'll leave links below to everything that I used, all the tools and this lift obviously. And if you haven't already, check out some of those other videos I mentioned of Kyle Toth turning the legs for my couch, and then this modern industrial looking coffee table. Thanks so much for watching. If you feel like I earned it, give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and get subscribed to the channel. I've got more of this type of thing to come, and I'd love to have you along to watch the future videos. Thanks again. I'll see you real soon.